Now that we've looked at functional components, so let's look at class components. Let's start by creating a new class component. We'll pretend like we have not seen the last few tutorials or repeat them pretty much, but this time we'll just be using class components and not functional ones. So let's say that we want to list all of the movies where Jim Carrey was awesome. We'll go ahead and create the Sonic class component. So we'll just go ahead and create a new component, Sonic.js. As you can see so far, pretty much identical. And we'll go ahead and import React from React. Then instead of creating a functional component, we're going to go ahead and create a class-based component. And this class-based component is going to extend React.component. So this is one way of doing this. I will show you another way of doing this a little bit later on. But we're going to go ahead and create this render method, which is a requirement. This is a lifecycle method that's required inside a class component. So whenever you're creating a class component, pretty much the only lifecycle method that's required is render. We're going to be looking at lifecycle methods in a later tutorial, but just know that if you want your class component to return anything, you need this render method. And then within the render method, you need a return statement, very similar to how you needed the return statement inside the functional component. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to return Sonic by Jim Carrey. So the only other part that we need to do, is same as inside functional components, is export default Sonic. So now that we've created this class-based component, again, very similar to functional components, we're going to go ahead and need to import it. So we'll go ahead and comment that one out. I'm going to go ahead and delete all these. And we're going to import now Sonic from the root directory components. And we have this Sonic component. So again, in order to render the component exactly the same way, we're going to surround it inside this tag, Sonic, save, and go to our browser, and there it is, Sonic by Jim Carrey. But we can't forget about the mask. So let's go ahead and create another component if we want to display the mask. I mean, this is so far the only way that we know how to do it. So we'll create mask.js and we'll import React. And then we're going to deconstruct, and we're going to look at deconstructing later on, component from React. So you might have seen something like this. This is just pretty much is a different way. Instead of you having to do this, you can deconstruct it and have it imported up here. So like I said, we'll look at that stuff a little bit more in detail later. I just want to show you that this stuff actually exists. So we'll go ahead and create our class component called mask. And this time, instead of extending React.component, we can just say it extends component. We're still going to need our render method. And within our render method, we're going to need to return a React element, which in this case is just a div tag. Let's go ahead and write mask by Jim Carrey, save it, and in order for it to be rendered on the screen, we're going to need to import it and then render it inside our app.js. So we're going to go ahead and import mask from components mask. And then down here, in order to render it, we're just going to type in mask, save it, go back. Does not contain a default export. So again, we forgot to do export default mask. Now there are extensions for VS Code, which we are going to install this later on. This is one of the reasons why I keep forgetting about it. Is just because you're so used to creating these small little snippets of code, just typing it in, like RCC, and what it does is just automatically creates the whole construction for you, including this little export default statement. Like I said, a little bit later on, you hardly ever even think about it. But let's go ahead and write that down there because we're not using any kind of extension right now. And there it is, Mask by Jim Carrey. So again, we're starting to see repetition occurring. In the next tutorial, we'll look at how to pass prompts to class-based components to eliminate having to create a new component for every single movie that we want to create. That's awesome by Jim Carrey.